Hi, this is Aaron Wilson. And today the Texans released veteran offensive guard Shaq Mason. It was a move that needed to happen. They're going to free up $9 million in cap space after June 1 by designating him as a post-June 1st release. So what that means is there's no immediate salary cap relief with the release of Shaq Mason, who they originally traded for from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and signed to a 3-year, $36 million deal. They restructured his contract last year, and it was a situation where Shaq, his play did decline this past season. Some of that because of age, I believe, and some of it because of health. He sprained his MCL in his knee, and he was out for a couple of games at the end of the season, and then returned for the Chiefs playoff game. Didn't play particularly well. Showed some rust, showed some definite signs of wearing down there at the end of the season. And throughout the season, whether it's his fault or not, was attributed for a lot of sacks, 10 and a half, according to some metrics, next-gen stats, which was the most among offensive guards. So they move on from Shaq Mason. And before I get into free agency, I want to talk about the offensive line and kind of how it's constituted and where the Texans go from here. So let's start with Shaq. Releasing Shaq leaves a hole in the starting job open at right guard. Do you fill it with Juice Scruggs? Do you draft linemen high enough in the draft that you can develop him and get him in the lineup quickly? Do you give Kenyon Green another chance? Or do you sign one in free agency? And my understanding is, per sources, they're going to sign an offensive guard, and they're also probably going to draft one. So they're going to try to acquire a couple of new guards and rebuild this offensive line under the vision of new offensive coordinator Nick Caley and run game coordinator and offensive line coach Cole Popovich, and they are former colleagues with the Patriots, where they learned a lot from Dante Scarnecchia, one of the best offensive line coaches ever in the history of the NFL. So looking at the other spots, and I get this question a lot, was Laremy Tunsil going to restructure? Right now there's no movement to restructure, and they could wait, kind of a break the glass when needed type of move later in the offseason if they need the cash and cap to go ahead and restructure a Tunsil deal. I could see the wisdom in doing that, when you're trying to do a Derek Stingley Jr. extension, and also potentially something with Jalen Petrie, their nickel. I think with Stingley, as expensive as it'll be, it may be a less complicated negotiation because it's understood that they're going to make him the highest paid corner in the NFL. I expect that to happen this offseason. So looking at the Texans' financial outlook, that was helped by Azeez Al-Shaair restructuring his contract, and that freed up $6.2 million in cap space. With Christian Kirk now under this total $16.5 million, I think they're going to adjust that deal too and try to pick up even more cap space, perhaps as soon as between now and the start of the free agent signing period on Wednesday. Monday is the first day of the, quote, legal tampering period. And the legal tampering period, the way it works is the NFL allows you to discuss parameters of deals, but not finalize them, meaning not signed. But a lot of free agency is done on Monday and Tuesday, and by the start of the bell on Wednesday, when you can officially sign players, Wednesday at 3 p.m. Central, free agency is pretty much the die is cast. A lot of these decisions are made. And I don't expect the Texans necessarily to be the biggest spenders, highest bidders on a lot of these free agents. A little different from a year ago where they signed Danielle Hunter. They were involved in the Saquon Barkley sweepstakes. They came close on Saquon Barkley. They came close to bringing back Sheldon Rankins and ultimately wind up with Joe Mixon on a new contract. So far, no movement to adjust Joe Mixon's deal. I think you could make an argument that Joe may have earned himself a raise. We'll see. But for now, the deal is just staying the way it is. Same thing with Danielle Hunter. A lot of people ask about restructuring Danielle Hunter's contract, and it's more likely that, that would be an extension, not just a simple paper restructure where they move around the money. One note on these restructures. The signing bonus is treated as a signing bonus in terms of conversion of salary, but you're still paid as for the players' purposes in these increments. You get paid over a period of 36 weeks, so 18 game checks times 2, And so it's all divided up and budgeted. It's just a matter of how it's counted in terms of the salary cap. And I believe with Azeez Al-Shaair, they had an avoid year to account for his cap figure, to prorate that out and spread out the impact of this new bonus. And so he gets his guarantees, and he still makes the same amount of money. I believe it was $9 million he's set for this year. So a couple little accounting things going on with the Texans. And sticking with the offensive line topic that we began this conversation with, Titus Howard, he's back, and I expect him to not have to adjust his deal necessarily. It's something they might do. So far, no movement toward a Titus Howard contract adjustment. It stands as is. So we'll see if they change that stance, move toward that in the next few days or later in the offseason. But I expect Titus Howard back on the team one way or another, and that is a shared goal for the Texans and Titus Howard. And let's be honest, he's their second best offensive lineman, whether he's the right tackle, whether he's the guard. And they have some options. They want to get a swing tackle. They want to get a couple of guards. And so the biggest holes are figuring out the interior offensive line and whether you move Titus Howard back to right tackle or if you stick him at left guard. Again, have some continuity on the left side. More likely you're replacing the right guard and you're looking to add to this offensive line. And so let's go over free agency now. That's what a lot of you guys want to hear about. So we'll talk about the offensive guard market. Everybody knows Trey Smith is the Chiefs franchise player, so he's not available to the Texans or any team. Nobody's going to trade for him. He'll be a Chief. I'm sure they'll get that done. But that leaves a lot of other free agents. And it's not a great group of free agent guards, but there are some players that arguably are upgrades to what the Texans currently have. That starts with Will Fries from the Colts. And I think Will's going to be very expensive, probably out of their price range. He's coming off a broken leg. He really came on before this injury last season, has made a full recovery, and he's definitely a player of heavy interest around the NFL. Tevin Jenkins, Chicago Bears, versatile player, has had some penalty issues, some temper issues on the field. Feisty, like the way he plays. Haven't heard of any interest so far from the Texans, and they can't officially like someone yet, but you can have interest. And so I haven't heard about them being in the Tevin Jenkins market. A player I like, and he's older, but I think that might be what they need, is Kevin Zeitler. Kevin Zeitler played for the Lions, played very well. Before that, he was with the Ravens and the Bengals. And I think he's someone that's really solid, good leader, good technician, comes from an excellent run-blocking offense with the Lions. And there's a lot to say about older linemen like Zeitler and the value that him, or even a Brandon Scherff, I know he got into it with Azeez Al-Shaair. I'm sure they could squash it and they could be teammates. So Brandon Scherff, Iowa guy, Kevin Zeitler, another tough guy. I like those type of moves to have some leadership in the line. That's one of the things you look for is intangibles. So there are a couple of linemen I'm going to keep an eye on as they head into free agency. James Daniels, Pittsburgh Steelers. He's coming off of a torn Achilles. He was having a great season before that happened. Never been a great run blocker, good pass blocker. Another Iowa guy, a little younger, good offensive lineman. I think he has a lot of upside. Don't necessarily think he's in their price range. So I'm thinking less expensive for what they want to do. And that won't be Mekhi Becton. I don't necessarily think he helps them that much. I think there's still a chance that he could reunite with the Philadelphia Eagles. We'll see what his plans are. And looking at the rest of the offensive line group, there's a lot of players. We talked about Scherff. One that has a lot of versatility and is athletic and well coached is Patrick McCarry from the Baltimore Ravens. And you saw the way the Ravens ran the football right down the Texans' throat with Derrick Henry, and he was a big part of what they were doing. McCarry might, if his price is normal, be someone that they might want to look at. I think Aaron Banks, San Francisco 49ers, would be great with the Texans, and is ultimately, though, they're trying to get a little bit away from some of the zone blocking style of linemen, so probably something that they don't pursue. And he's going to be expensive, too. He has the pedigree as a former second-round draft pick. Will Hernandez, he's from the Cardinals, and he had a season-ending knee injury, so got to check on his health, and maybe that allows them to get a lineman like him, at a bargain, if you can get a chance to negotiate with a Will Hernandez. Dalton Risner has been available a few times. He's with the Vikings, and the Texans have never showed interest in the past. We'll see. There's some new, voices in the room in terms of Nick Caley and Cole Popovich. Maybe they will feel differently about it. I haven't heard a lot of interest in, say, Matt Pryor from the Chicago Bears. Laken Tomlinson, he's been paid several times. He's with the Seahawks now. And, you go down the list. There's Evan Brown. There's Tristan Colon. Evans with the Arizona Cardinals. So is Tristan. So a lot of people leaving the Cardinals. I thought they did a nice job with their counter blocking to free up James Conner. A lot of clips of that on YouTube and other outlets. So Instagram. I really like what I see from the way they block that play, and James Conner, how decisive and downhill he was. So, yeah, I think look at these Cardinals linemen, see if any of them are a fit. So the Texans, they'll get someone. That I'm confident. Who will be ultimately come down to price, and for me to sit here and say, well, they're targeting this guy. This is the one. This is the lineman here on a Friday night in Houston, Texas, and to say, well, that's the lineman they're going to get. I think that'd be a stretch. So we'll keep monitoring it. I'll give you some other free agency updates while we're at it. Some of them are minor. Some of them are still important. Still in talks with Sheldon Rankins. That's still a possibility. Also a possibility he goes to the market. So no done deal, but something they're interested in. Sheldon Rankins, potential reunion with the Texans, still a possibility. And they are, just like they did with Kurt Heinrich, you saw my report about the 1 year, $2.35 million contract, max value for Kurt Heinrich as a non-tendered restricted free agent. Well, they may do the same type of deal for Zach Thomas. That's a reserve offensive lineman, so still looking at depth. And with linebacker Jake Hansen, as I reported before in one of my updates, Hansen, they have interest. It's mutual about him coming back. Nothing really happening at this time for a lot of their other free agents, like, say, Eric Murray, the safety. They haven't made any move for Miles Bryant. They've had conversations with all these guys. They have some varying degrees of interest in having some of them back. And Delshon Phillips, the linebacker, Neville Hewitt, another linebacker, special teamers, both of interest to the Texans. Probably head to free agency. Nothing that's really on the front burner with those guys, or Irv Smith, or several other free agents. So I expect a lot of their free agents to go to the market, for the Texans to stay in touch with them, and potentially do new deals if they don't find a better replacement in free agency. And yeah, free agency, a very fluid process, as all of you guys know. You all are savvy NFL and Texans fans and have seen this story unfold, these scenarios, time and time again. This is the time for business. Brian Billick, former Ravens coach, used to say, there's a time for play and a time for pay. This is the time for pay. And everything, you always hear in business about ABC, always be closing, all of these things. All the cliches apply. And it is a, real stock market type of approach. Players and the teams, they have different values. The players, may want to live in a certain city. They may want to play with a certain type of offense or certain players. Ultimately, though, it usually comes down to money and who will pay the most when it comes to making these decisions. They're highly personal, and it's just something that they have to work through. But yeah, the Texans, a different looking offensive line. I know a lot of fans wanted to see Shaq Mason released. I would remind you, this Shaq is a good guy. He played very hard, played very well for them for one season, just hit the wall last season. And yeah, I think for a lot of these, people, they don't really necessarily, because they don't get to know these guys, they just kind of take it like, oh, well, I want this guy on the team. I think he's bad. He was an excellent offensive lineman for a long time. He's had a proud career. He's won a couple of Super Bowl rings with the Patriots. A lot of respect for Shaq, so wish him well. And I'm sure that he'll have some interest from other teams in free agency. My expectation is that he will look to continue his career, and it just won't be with the Texans. So, all things come to an end. They move on and move forward. And now it's going to be a different looking offensive line, and it's probably not the only change we're going to see. So we're going to see more linemen come onto the roster, and it's his most important thing, like D'Amico Ryan said at the NFL Scouting Combine. It got to get better on the offensive line. There were too many miscues, his words, on the offensive line, and that means the penalties, the pass protection breakdowns. And their hope is that with better coaching and with a one-voice mentality, but there were too many voices in the room last year. I don't feel like Chris Strausser necessarily was all in the past couple of years with the Texans. So it's good that he has moved on. They've moved on. Maybe he moves to retirement. So we'll see how this goes. But yeah, for right now, we're looking at a different offense, one without Shaq Mason, and the Texans are looking to make a lot of improvements. They have big goals for this offseason. It's all about one thing, trying to take the next step, as they say, get to the AFC Championship game or further, dare I say, Super Bowl. Odds are not high in their favor right now, but it's a long time till September. So let's see what kind of roster they can put together, how they can put this thing into a better, more competitive football team. So Nick Caserio had a good offseason last year, but this has been the real hole in this game, the offensive line, because you look at some of the things other than, Laramie Tunsil and continuing with him. That was a move made by Bill O'Brien and Jack Easterby. They have, been smart enough to keep Laramie Tunsil in the fold and continue to make him one of the highest paid tackles in football. The Titus Howard contract they did, that's a Nick Caserio extension of a Brian Gaine draft pick, first-round pick. That hasn't worked out as planned. They have had, middling success with some of these other players, but not quite enough with, say, a Juice Scruggs, and certainly not a Kenyon Green. That's, Nick's arguably his greatest miss, 15th overall pick, a player that's not going to get the fifth-year option. Right now, I expect him to come to training camp and compete. So, yeah, offensive line, a major point of emphasis, something I'm very focused on, and, of course, the fans. And, yeah, appreciate you guys tuning in and listening. Yeah, please like and subscribe and comment and help me continue to grow the channel. This is for you guys, for you all to have a chance to really interact and plan to do more and more content, and just kind of getting started. This is, I think, my 5th or 6th month on YouTube. So I started it during the season, and I'm liking it, and I think this is something that's continued to be a real focus for me, in addition to all my written content on X/Twitter at Aaron Wilson _NFL. And, of course, at www.click2houston at KPRC2, and on the airwaves with them, too, with Randy McElroy and R. Alexander. And then I'm on Instagram as well at Aaron Wilson 7128. So appreciate you guys, and look forward to our next conversation.